Jai Shri Ram. In my last video, I spoke about the cultivation of Hindu cultural values with respect to food as helping shape Hindu identity for second-generation people growing up in the West. So today I'd like to talk about family values in the same regard. One thing that stands out when discussing family values in the West compared to Hindu society is the size of what is considered to be one's family. Here in the Anglophone West, the nuclear family has been the norm for centuries, even dating back to the time when colonists first settled here in the late 1600s. A family consisted of a man, his wife, and the children that the two of them had together. Of course, in the modern day, this has become further eroded away by the high divorce rates, remarriage, children born out of wedlock, and so on. And then in even more recent times by the marriage of same-sex couples and their subsequent adoption of children. However, that kind of social decay and immorality is not what I wanted to talk about here. And I also don't want to talk about how they see their pet dogs and cats as members of their family. But rather what I wanted to talk about was the distinction between the nuclear family and the extended family. This is not only important in terms of size and scope, of course, with the extended family being inclusive of a far larger group of people, varying degrees of how closely you were related to them, but also in terms of the ideas of duty and obligation. If you buy into the nuclear family idea, your family's togetherness is dependent on the strength of your marriage, because again, it's just the married couple and their children. This explains why social quote-unquote conservatives in the West like to speak so much about marriage and play up these ideals of a quote-unquote family man being a devoted husband and a father in his nuclear family. And it also helps explain why the family has so disintegrated in the West so quickly as the institution of marriage itself has weakened. In the extended family structure, however, one marriage is not the keystone upon which all the family ties are held together, but rather each marriage involving family members plays an important role, obviously a lesser role because there are many of these marriages as opposed to just one. As a result, troubles in a marriage have less of a downstream negative effect in scope, and people view their marriages much more as a union that has brought two families together and one that helps uphold the strength of the greater extended family unit and helps them view the marriage less as being just the union of two individual people, which is, of course, what you see in the West today. This distinction between group orientation and individual orientation is the main theme here. In the West, people enter into marriages to make themselves feel more fulfilled. They feel that an individual person wants to find companionship, intimacy, and love with another, as well as wanting to bring children into the world. And so they were encouraged to marry. Unlike our culture, where traditionally we have the idea of a pitrarana, a debt that you owe to one's ancestors that needs to be fulfilled by having children, carry on one's lineage, and also the idea that another person would be brought into the family another person would be brought into the family for day-to-day tasks like household work done by women, for example, traditionally, or another income from a man. These things don't really hold water when the extended family is not together. Anyway, regardless of modern ideas of feminism and a woman's role in a family, of course, obviously nowadays around the world you're seeing women work outside the home because of the changing economy and so on. Again, not really talking about that. I'm trying to separate modern traits of the last maybe 50 years or so from these kind of centuries-long differences between our culture and Western culture. So anyway, the chasing of one's emotional happiness is what dominates ideas of family values in the West today, as opposed to adherence to one's duties and the obligations one should feel towards one's family members in an extended family structure. Nowhere is this more clear than the enormous emphasis placed on romantic love to keep a marriage and thereby a family together in the Western system. Falling in love and wanting to spend the rest of your life with someone is the generally accepted reason for marrying in the West over the last few generations, unfortunately for them. It's no surprise then that when families are built upon the institution of marriage, and the institution of marriage itself is built upon such an emotionally charged feeling as love, that marriages across racial, ethnic, religious, and class lines are quite common in the West. Of course, in any traditional culture, like Hindu culture, for example, or again, any traditional culture throughout the world, throughout time, since marriage is not based on individual emotional satisfaction, people would purposely seek to minimize the differences between themselves and the family of their prospective spouse. In our system of arranged marriage, people, of course, seek someone of the same jati, again, if it's arranged, same jati, which tends to grant some significant similarities in language, food habits, outlook, and things of this nature. And whenever this may not be the case, and wherever this may not be the case, I think we'd all understand that any Hindu would tend to prefer marrying someone of the same mother tongue, same food habit at least, right? So, let's say that someone from a Brahmin community in UP is going to marry someone outside of their own jati. Obviously, they would fit in better with a Brahmin from, Gujarat than like a Dalit from Assam or something like that, right? I mean, even when you're marrying outside of the jati, I think people would still try to go for as similar of a different group as you possibly can. When bringing two families together in a lifelong bond, why create unnecessary rifts by joining together with people who are so different from you, is my basic point. So I just wanted to underline this distinction in ideas of family and marriage between us and the West with respect to individual versus a group-oriented dynamic, because a lot of times people like to use the word family or the word marriage or the word, tradition, religion, whatever the case may be. And, Hindus think of those things from a Hindu perspective. Westerners think of those things from a Western perspective. And when you just kind of use a word in the English language to mean what you think it means or what it means to you, that's not really how actual cultural discourse is done, right? The only people who are doing cultural discourse in that way are the ones who really don't understand the deep fundamental differences between us and them. And like I've talked about with these other kind of immigration-related videos, this is a serious problem that I perceive has happened with, I'm seeing it in people like myself, the people who are actually born and raised here in the West. But I think the problem itself is rooted in our parents' generation because of basically two reasons. One, they don't really deeply understand the differences between the West and our culture. And two, they don't really understand how much of their own Indian, dharmic, Hindu worldview was shaped by living in a Hindu society as opposed to just being taught very specific things by your parents or other family members. Right? We're all raised Hindu. I was raised Hindu, but I was not raised in Hindu society. No one who is born and raised in the Western world is raised in Hindu society, and that's an extremely important part of the picture. But like I said, I was contrasting arranged marriage with kind of modern Western marriage. We, of course, see that love marriage, even in India, is becoming quite popular among a certain class of urban people, and that's only going to grow. So that's another thing to keep watch of and to be aware of on this topic. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Jai Shri Ram.